There you go. I'm sitting with Orville Knight. He's a member of Muscatine First Nation. He will be sharing his stories and his history with us. So, Orville, tell me a little bit about your family, who your mom and dad were, and your grandparents and great grandparents.
Hi, my name is Orville Knight, excuse me, and my father's name was David Knight. He was a former chief in Muscatine. He was adopted by Chief Robert there. He come from Moose Lake, Manitoba. His mother had married a person named Jack Crane, and they had a child named Stuart Crane. So that's my father's history. And he was an orphan. His mother died when he was very young, and he was adopted by the chief, Robert Bear, by custom. He became a member when he turned 18 of Muscatine, but he was actually from Moose Lake, Manitoba, and he was a non-status Indian. And his father, his name was Robert Perry. He was a white man. I believe he was Scottish. I don't know too much more about him. I don't know where he came from. He might have come from Scotland, but that was my great grandpa, and that was on my father's side. On my mother's side, William Umperville was her father. My mother's name was Mary Lillian Knight, and her people come from a place called Stanley, not Stanley Mason, Stanley. It was an area outside of Muscatine, off the reserve. But they came from another place close to Melfort, Saskatchewan. My mother and my father were organists. They were into music. They played organ in the church every Sunday. And my father taught me how to play the organ when I was young. He would play a fiddle, violin, and I would chord for him with the organ. And that's where I was introduced into music. Most of my youth I spent playing the violin, playing the guitar, and singing, and playing the organ. My grandfather, on my mother's side, his name was Robert Bear. I called him Musum. I wasn't related to him by blood. He married my mother's aunt. Her name was Christy, and she was delved in medicine. She was a medicine woman. My grandfather Robert, he was about 88 or 89 when he died. The whole family, all his brothers and sisters, lived to a ripe old age. Chief Austin Bear, his dad was Walter, and that was my grandpa's brother. But as I said, we were not related by blood, but we were related by marriage. But we looked after old Robbie, we called him. We looked after him. When he got old, he turned blind. He turned totally blind, and we looked after him. He was a nice old man, beautiful. He had a lot of good stories to tell me, and he gave me a good example of what a man should be, how a man should act in life, and how he should treat people. Robert Bear was also an organist. He taught my mother, and then my mother, when she married my dad, she taught him. And he ended up becoming the best organist. That's kind of strange how it worked out, but that's what happened. The family of my grandfather, as I said, lived to old age. Matter of fact, there was a show on TV one time, a news release, that showed all these Bear boys and the women all drawing pension at the same time. And there was about 7 of them. It was amazing. Some of them lived, well, one of them, his name was Henry Bear. He lived to an age of 106 years old. They all lived, they all drew old age pension. And that was incredible. Now my mother's dad, his name was William. I never did see him. And so, but he was raised by Robert, so that was also my grandpa, I guess, by blood.
So can you tell me a little bit about who your siblings are?
My siblings were, my older brother's name was William Knight. He worked in the church. He stayed with my parents most of his life, but then he had his own place, and he raised a daughter named I forget her name, but anyway, he raised one daughter. It wasn't really his daughter, but it was his. He married Marilyn Bear, and she had a daughter, and he raised her. Her name was Tony. She is selling clothing right now in Prince Albert, and she's doing good. That's my oldest brother. He passed on when he was in his 50s. Other brother, his name was Peter Knight. He was a good singer. He sang a lot of tunes, like he could imitate Pat Boone, Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash. He was a very good singer. People always demanded him to sing when he was attending a party of some kind. And my other brother's name was Harvey. He's into medicine right now. Not medicine, but he's an elder. He's got a lodge, and he works at the Prince Albert Penitentiary as an elder. He counsels the inmates on spiritual matters. I have another brother named Vernon Knight. He's also a musician. He sang with Chester Knight and the Wind, and he still sings a lot today. Then my other brother is Chester Knight. He's the famous one in the family. He ended up winning a Juno in 2000 for making the best Aboriginal music. And he's doing well today. He's got his own house in Saskatoon. He has an off-reserve house, and he just bought it himself. Well, the same with Harvey. He bought a house. He has his own house off the reserve. And then I had a sister. Her name was Eileen. She married a gentleman from northern Saskatchewan, a place called, I'm not sure what it's called, Peter Ballantyne Band anyway. His name was George Moore, and they lived on Muscatine. They did well. She worked at the residential school as she was a teacher's helper. Then I have another sister. Her name was Eileen. Thelma, she was the first one to get a degree in the family, and she always kind of rubbed it in. But she was smart. She taught at the SIFC College in Saskatoon, Indian Federated College. She ended up contacting an illness called diabetes, I think, and she ended up having to take dialysis the last few years of her life because of her kidney failure. But she did good. She liked to play Scrabble with me, but she only beat me twice, and I never let her beat me. But anything else, she's smarter than me. Then I have another brother. His name is Malcolm. He contacted polio when he was a baby, 6 months old. So he never really walked well in his life, but now he's on a wheelchair and he's in the hospital right now, and hopefully he's getting better. That's Malcolm. I believe that's all my brothers and sisters. I didn't miss any out, I don't believe.
Okay, good. Okay. So, you grew up on Muscadet, yes?
Yes.
Okay, so what do you remember as a child on Muscadet?
Muscadet was a good place. I enjoyed living in Muscadet because people here in Muscadet were very calm. Matter of fact, I worked in the courts in Prince Albert for about 5 years, and the RCMP, when they referred to Muscadet, they called it Sleepy Hollow. I don't know why they called it that, but I think it's because it was so quiet out there and nothing ever happened, like no crimes. I know I felt comfortable walking around by myself at night sometimes, going for walks and sometimes runs. Muscadet was a very clean. People around here, they never locked their doors. Well, there was no need. Nobody was into stealing. Well, that's a tradition in the Indian world, is not to steal. The only beings that stole in the Indian world were dogs, animals. People just didn't do that. It was contrary to good living, contrary to being a good person. Anyway, if you wanted something, somebody would give it to you. It was part of the traditional culture. And today, when I had a house, I never locked my door. And I even lived in Edmonton, I never locked my door. And I think all I ever lost was a pack of cigarettes one time. That's a good record, Muscadet, we used to hunt with slingshots. We never did do well with the slingshots because it took a lot of stones to kill a rabbit with a slingshot. We used to go in groups and sometimes we'd kill a few rabbits. But we usually hunted with a 22 caliber rifle, and we could get a deer with that, but I never did. But I did get a few rabbits, and I think I killed a duck one time with a 22. A shotgun, I was afraid of because it was too loud and it was too harsh and knocked you back. I used it once and I didn't use it again. I wasn't a great hunter, but like I said, we played soccer in Muscadet. That was a game that we called it football, but it wasn't football. And we never really followed the rules. Like, we grabbed it by our hands and carry it a little bit, which we were not supposed to. But that was a popular game in Muscadet, soccer. But we also played floor hockey or ground hockey, And we didn't have any sticks usually. We'd go to the bush and cut a bent piece of wood, tree, and make a hockey stick. And we saw our puck was usually an old can. And we played that. We were very active. We were outside playing all the time. When we weren't working, we were playing. Because you couldn't call us lazy Indians simply because we were working all the time. We had to cut wood every evening, all winter, and all summer too, because that's how we cooked our food, is through wood, burning wood. And you had to cut enough wood to keep the house warm all night. And then we hauled water from the river or from wells nearby, and when that didn't work in the wintertime, we'd haul snow, fill up a barrel with snow, and then we'd melt that. We were very busy. We didn't have time to play our video games. Well, actually, we didn't have any. I think today, I think there's too much video games and kids aren't as active as they used to be. But we were working and playing outside summer and winter. We were strong children, very strong. When I was young, I moved to Ottawa. I went and lived in Ottawa with my aunt. Her name was Mary Ann Legault. She was my dad's adopted sister, and she was adopted also too by Chief Robert Bear. And she lived in Ottawa. She married a Frenchman. His name was John Legault. And I stayed there for about 6 months. I was about 4 years old when I went down there. And it was a very interesting experience because I learned to speak a little bit of French, like parlez-vous français, and says blue, 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 blue. I can speak French to some degree, you know. But that was quite an experience, and it was quite a good learning experience. And when I started school in Muscatine, I was 5 years old. The teacher, I became the teacher's pet because I had, because of my travels, I had a kind of a world view of what was going on. And as a matter of fact, I passed my grade 8 when I was about 12 years old, and I ended up taking my grade 9 in Prince Albert Collegiate Institute when I was 12. Actually, my birthday is on September 19th, so I wasn't 12 very long, but it's kind of unusual to start grade 9 at that age. But I was 13 most of the year. My teacher's name was Miss Moore. She was a lawyer. She was a good teacher. She taught me well. I and Austin Bear, we took grade 12 together and grade 8 together. And he never passed that year because he didn't go back to rewrite the exams because we didn't do the exams right, but we had to do them over again. But he never came back. I came back, and then I ended up going to getting my grade 9.
So, Orville, going back to your childhood, I don't know if we covered this, but how did the families help each other and treat each other back when you were young?
Well, we treated each other with, I suppose we're good to one another. Well, we all lived in the same community, so we had to get along. The ladies belonged to an organization called Women's Auxiliary. It was called WA. They call it double. And they'd meet every Wednesdays. They'd get together and do some sewing and making clothing, blankets. They'd take them to go sell them or bingo them off and stuff like that. It was a way of gathering together and doing something out of the ordinary. We also had organizations called bees, and these bees would cut wood. People would get together and cut wood for a house. Like a person would say, I want to have a bee this weekend. The word would get out. Some family would say they wanted a bee, and what happened is people would go out and cut wood. They'd bring a load of wood to this house, and then they'd give them a big meal. They'd provide them with a meal. And sometimes some places got, well, the smallest I ever heard was 16 loads of wood. But my father set up a bee one time, and usually after the bee they'd have a dance, a community dance. And my father, he had the biggest bee in Muscadet. I think he got 37 loads of wood. And but he said it doesn't have to be dry wood, it can be green wood. And so they mixed it up, and the green wood is easier to find than dry wood. And so he ended up getting the most wood in Muscadet. And then he had a bee, a dance that night, and in order to promote his bee, he had prizes at the dance there. There would be a draw. First prize was $5, which was a lot of money in those days. And the next prize was a tin of tobacco, and the next prize was third prize was a pound of tea, and a few cans of milk and stuff like that. But and I remember George Smith won that bee. He got the $5. Yeah, that's how the community got along. They helped one another. And they all went to this Anglican church. My uncle, his name was Daniel Umfreville. He was a priest. He taught in that church a few times. But there was usually off the reserve priests that would come in, and in the summer times there would be student priests, and they would live out there in Muscadet, and they became part of the community, and was interesting. That's how we learned white cultures through them, and living with us, and they became our friends. It was a good life. People were happy, and like I said, I guess we're always busy. We had organized sports. I know we even had a curling rink on Muscadet, and people went there to curl and hang out. We had baseball teams. We had hockey teams, and there was a lot of activity, group activity. There was no time really to go out and get into mischief because we were busy interacting with one another, and we didn't have TVs because imagine you watch TV, there's a lot of crime committed on these TVs, and it gets into the minds of children, and maybe they act it out.
Yep. So did I ask you? Did you go to school at Muscadet?
Yeah, I did go to school in Muscadet. My teacher name was Mrs. Moore.
Oh, okay.
Like she was a lawyer. And my other teacher was her sister. Her name was Mrs. Stewart.
What age was that?
What?
How old were you when that happened?
Uh, I started school when I was 5, and I finished there when I was 12 years old. So I was there in Muscadet School for about 7 years. And
Then you went to town?
yeah, I went to All Saints
Oh, residential school.
residential school. Yeah,
Right, right.
but I was lucky when I went to residential school. I wasn't a child. Like I wasn't a young child.
Yeah.
I imagine people who went when they was 5 or 6 years old. That was kind of traumatic, because you want to be with your mommy when you're that age.
Yeah.
But at 12 years old, well, you kind of, become an adolescent, and you're not really dependent on your parents that age. So going to residential school was actually a good experience for me, because we had regular meals, good meals, and we had a lot of activity there. And that's where I got to meet a lot of the girls. Life was interesting in All Saints for me. I enjoyed my time. I was there about 3 or 4 years. But it turned out good, residential school experience for me.
Well, that's good. That's good. So switching gears. How far back do you remember who chief and council were?
There was a chief, I remember, his name was Robert Bear. That was my father's father. And he seemed to be chief all the time. I believe he was a hereditary chief. I don't know how that worked at that time. But he wasn't voted in, I don't believe, and he just was chief. They call him Chief Robert Bear. His first name was Baystute. And he never had any children of his own, but he adopted a number of children. I know he adopted my father and my Aunt Mary Ann. And I remember his wife, I think her name was Marie, Marie, I believe. And she used to take me up when I come down and visit me, and I jump on her knee and she'd hug me. And I remember she was chewing gum one time, and I said, "Give me some gum." She just took it right out of her mouth and gave me, and that tasted good. Those were the good old days. Yeah, that was the chief, Robert Bear, and his wife Marie. What?
Anybody else you remember being chief and council back then?
Oh, yeah, chief and council. Well, my father's father or stepfather was a chief, and he became a chief himself. There was another chief on Muscadet. His name was Andrew Bear. He was chief on more than one occasion. And then there was other chief. I remember Scampy Bear, they called him. His name was Gilbert Bear. There was a lot of Gilbert Bears in Muscadet. I think there was 3 or 4 of them. There was a Gilbert Bear, we called him Scampy. There was Gilbert Carpenter. He was Gilbert Bear. And then there was Gilbert James. But he was Gilbert Bear also. And then there was another Gilbert come from Montreal Lake. His name was Gilbert Bear. They just called him that because he was a little bit younger. Those were the chiefs that I remember was as far back. But there was a chief called Joe Bear. He was father to the present chief, which is Ron Bear. He was a soldier. He fought in Korea. I believe there was a number of soldiers that fought in Korea. It was John Bear and Robert Bear. And, I believe it was somebody. Oh, Skizix, they called him. That was Skizix Brass. His name was. He lived in Muscatine. He was married to Cicely Brass, and those three fought in the Korean War. Coincidentally, my Aunt Marianne, she was in the army too. She was a soldier. My father was in the army, but he never went to a war. He was there for about 2 years.
So what did he like back then? Did they like just voluntarily join the army, or were they conscripted, or like how does that work?
Oh, they volunteered. I think Indians probably like fighting or something. The war going on, let's go, they'd say. No, they were never conscripted, but they always joined and they helped. There was a lot of soldiers that went overseas to fight, and some of them even came back with wives, but I don't know who they were. It was something that the Indians were very active getting involved in army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. So, in can you explain the history of Muscadet in your own words, from as far back as you can remember to now?
The history of Muscadet was a good history, actually. I believe Muscadet was always somewhat advanced to other reserves. I don't know why that was, but I think it was because there was people who that made the reserve came from Little Red. They're actually not full-blooded Indians. They were Métis, actually, and they spoke English well. Even today, there's practically no Cree spoken on Muscadet, because it was an English-speaking reserve, and so they fitted in and were able to adapt to the existing culture that was around, and they got into farming and got into working with the off-reserve people. It was easier for them because they spoke English. And then there was another group that come from northern Manitoba, and they joined here in Muscadet. There were some people here that were already here. There were some birds and sequences, but they're not around anymore. And you see, in history, the Métis were given script, and the Indians were given reserves. Script meant you could get a piece of land, or you can take money or sell it. And the trouble is, if you sold it, you'd have nothing. But some Métis, I don't know, I know there was a group from Little Red that took, instead of script, they came to Muscadet and acquired reserve land. And like I said, some of the Indians on Muscadet were not full-blooded Indians. They were Métis, and that's why there's a lot of fair-skinned Indians in Muscadet, and they spoke English. They don't know Cree today.
Yeah.
But like I said, it was advanced, and Muscadet was the first reserve to give money to the people around Christmas time. They call it Leaseland Day, and the land was leased to off-reserve farmers, well, farmers and white farmers, and when they brought back the profits, we'd share them. We called them lease land payments. And I remember when I was a kid, they got as much as $100 a head, which was a lot of money in those days. You buy a pack of cigarettes then for 27 cents, a small pack, big pack, 34 cents.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so $5, $50, $100 was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember my mom went to the Broadway Cafe in PA, and she had all this money. She had $100 bill, and that Chinaman who was dealing with her started yelling, "Hey, Lillian's got a $100 bill!" And they all come running up. Well, $100 bills were very rare in those days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we got those lease land payments. I think a lot of reserves do that today, but Muscatine was called John Smith then. They were the first people to be giving out lease land payments. I believe my father was chief at that time when he started that. They used to give flour also, 100 pounds of flour for everybody in the family, and that would last all year, you know. We had no trouble making bannock when we were young because we got free flour from the reserve, and that come from the revenue that Muscatine made from the land. And when my father was chief, he made this deal with Robertson Construction, and he said they could have the money, the land, for 5 years, and they wouldn't have to make payments, but they would have to clear the land. There was a lot of bush in those days. But they cleared the land, they worked in construction, and then they'd get a crop, and they would just take it all, but they spent a lot of time clearing the land. I remember when I was a kid, I was 11 years old. I worked on the reserve, 12 years old, clearing brush, working for Robertson Construction. Today, the reserve is looks like there was never any bush there. So much open land, but there was a lot of bush on Muscatine. And now it's the land is very productive. That's what happened in Muscatine.
Nice. I like that. Okay, so I have one last question for you. What important message do you have and you want to share with our future generations about education? Because your grandchildren are going to see this, your sons and daughters, your great grandchildren, people in your family. It's sort of like a historical piece where we know what the band looks like from your perspective, and we want to know what you think, so your family can see it, years down the road when you're not with us. So you can leave your message and share it with us, and then we'll share it with the school, and we'll share it with other band members. We'll post it online, so your history will be here.
Muscatine, I believe an important thing to do for yourself when you're growing up is to get an education. You can get an academic education from the non-Aboriginal world, which is good. You can go on to get your grade 8, grade 7, grade 9, and then go on to university or go to a technical school, and you can get enough education where you can get a good job. That's what you can get from the non-Aboriginal world. But it's also important, and it's a little hard to get, is the education from the Aboriginal world. What you have to do is you have to find an elder or get involved in a group that is practicing the customs and maybe making sweats, teaching dancing, or fasting. I myself got involved with Dr. Danny Musqua. He was teaching, it's called the Learning Lodge. We'd go out and fast, and we'd spend 4 days, 3-4 days fasting, not eating, no water, no food, no drinking. And we'd share. We'd sit there and meditate and share. And we really had to focus on what we were learning, what he was teaching us. It's really because we had no food, no water to distract us from our learning. And we had to concentrate. And that way, it made it less, or made it easier to cope with the fact that we were going without food and without water. And then, after we finished this fasting, we would really appreciate what we had in this world, like food, water, and be almost like in a high from food and water. I remember I was doing a 4-day fast one time, and we also were taught to keep clean, to wash up, not look like we're suffering or something like that. Not. I guess if you suffer silently, you're rewarded openly, but if you try to show off your suffering, well, that's your reward right there. I remember I used to go down to the river and wash up. I'd have a hard time getting down the river on the second and third and fourth day. I was so weak. I have a hard time getting down there, and then I'd wash up. It was amazing how that water, just put it on my body and throw it on the face. It would just give me energy. I could practically almost run back up the hill. And I didn't take it. I didn't drink anything. I just put the water on my body. I learned that there's power in water. I think when babies get baptized in the church, they put a little water on their forehead. That implies power in the water. But the congregations go fast, and then they really realize how powerful that water is. What is important is getting an education from the Indian world, and you'll learn about the powers that the Indians have. Like they have powers in medicine, they have powers in healing, and they have a connection to the spiritual world. That's something that you can't get anyplace else, really. The Indian world is not going to go away, and so we should learn more about it, because that's where our power is, and that's where the future is, the Indian world. Hey.
Thank you so much for sharing your information with us. I really appreciate it.